with you. And I'm going to really control myself here because the person I'm going to share with you about, I have been doing research on her life for over 30 years, started in 1995. At the time, 1995. At the time, there wasn't much information in print out there. I happened up on at the Schomburg Library Museum in Harlem. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Um, I was there for another reason with a group of students, and I happened upon the file of historian on Black religious history and leaders, Richard Newman, his actual notes for the book that he wrote on Black religious leaders. And in his file is where I was able to begin my research on Princess ADORKA Laura KOFI. But I didn't learn about her then. I've known about her all of my life. So I'm going to be just quick and give you a snippet because this is a huge project for me. And at some point, I will turn it into a book. At some point, it will be a course that I teach or a series of seminars. But I want to just introduce her to those who probably have never heard of her. So just imagine with me, over 100 years ago, around 1890-ish, in what then was Gold Coast, West Africa. It wasn't yet Ghana as we know it today. It was considered Gold Coast. It was Gold Coast because they had gold. They were rich in minerals and gold. But she was a young woman born to a king, one of the tribal kings, living in the Gold Coast. As a child here in the US growing up, and I came of age in the 50s and 60s, we didn't learn about our African ancestry, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I learned it from home and at church about our African roots. And we were taught about Africa from school. What we did learn was that we were told they were savages. They were cannibals. They ate each other. They were uncivilized. However, while they were telling us this and telling the world this, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, around 1919, the tribal fathers in Gold Coast, West Africa met because they wanted to send someone out into diaspora, out to the US, to find and check on their brothers and sisters that had been stolen from the land. And they met as a tribe and they cast lots. I don't know if you understand what lots are. I don't have time to really explain it. But in scripture, when the story goes in the book of Acts, after Judas betrayed Jesus, and they were left one disciple, the disciples met and they cast lots to determine who would fill in the ranks. And the lot fell on someone who we don't even mention their name anymore. But in that tribal gathering, in the early 1900s in Gold Coast, West Africa, the lot fell on this young woman, this princess. And at the time, she did not want to come to the US, not because she didn't feel any care for her brothers and sisters that have been stolen from the land, but because she was a woman, because she was young, and at the time, I understand she was married. She did not speak much English, if any English, and so she didn't want to come. And the story goes, the story that I heard from a child growing up, was that she became ill, very ill to the point of death. And at some point, she surrendered and said, Lord, if it's your will that I go, heal my body and I will go. And miraculously like that, she was healed. And she made the voyage to these United States, vis-a-vis some of the European countries and Canada. She came to the United States not knowing anyone here and began to affiliate herself with of the ministries and churches. Primarily, though, she became associated with, and you'll know this name, Marcus Garvey, the Honorable Marcus Garvey, and the UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association. And she became one of Garvey's strongest supporters. She was learned the language. She was an articulate preacher, speaker. She had a mesmerizing personality. She was able to draw people to her in an astonishing way. And she traveled throughout the country on behalf of Garvey, spreading the news about his organization. There came a point, and we know the story, where Garvey was arrested. Part of that was the legacy of this country really decimating Black organizations and really breaking it down so that every time we make 2 steps forward, it goes 3 steps backward. So Garvey was arrested and imprisoned in Georgia. And his organization was falling apart. My dad also was a part of Garvey's organization in Florida during that same period of time. Princess KOFI went to visit Garvey when he was in jail in Georgia. Garvey served 5 years, I think, of his sentence before he was deported back to Jamaica. But Princess KOFI went to visit Garvey. And at that time, I don't know, and this is from my continuing research, the tension had mounted between them and between the lieutenants that were still active in the community, working on behalf of Garvey. Part of it was jealousy, because one, she was a woman, and at that time, it was unusual for a woman and a Black woman to be that prolific, to be that outspoken, to be that much a leader in the community as she was. And so there was a lot of infighting in Garvey's organization and a lot of dissension and pushback on Princess KOFI. So when she visited Garvey, after that visit, Garvey then, according to the record, historical record, sent word that Princess KOFI was a fake and that they should not follow her. So then that isolated her, but it did not isolate her followers. She continued to preach and teach. Her major idea was the connecting of Africans here in America to Africans in Africa through commerce, through connecting as brothers and sisters. In fact, when she would begin her speech, every time, and my dad was a witness to this, she would open with these words, and I'm quoting her. This is how she would introduce herself. And imagine now, this is past Sister Subihai, your context of history. But she would say, I am a representative from the Gold Coast of West Africa, seeking the welfare of Africa's children everywhere. Your kings and leaders of Africa, who are your blood brothers and sisters, have also given me a message to ask you. They say, you have been a long time away from home. Why have you not made preparations to come home? They say, if you want to come home, let us know. And if you don't want to come home, let us know. They say, in the Gold Coast of West Africa, there is a door open to you, and a hearty welcome waiting for you there. Well, that message was an unusual one at the time, because part of what the Eurocentric ideology was to separate and divide the Africans in the diaspora from the continent, to make us believe they were savages while they exploited the land, and to make them believe that we were savages and uncivilized. So that message was a message that was bringing both those here and there together. And at the same time, she was an entrepreneur. She was developing businesses, growing her own garden. They had a vegetable business, herbs, which she was able to teach them natural healing. So she was a healer. She was able to bring the spirituality from Africa as it was intertwined with Christianity, but not in a Eurocentric way. She had an understanding of scripture that for her time, the hermeneutic was of liberation, not the oppressor's message, but a liberating message. So when Garvey was imprisoned and he knew that he was not going to be allowed to stay here. He was still running the UNIA from prison in Georgia. But when he sent that message that she was a fake, Princess KOFI, and she was known as Mother KOFI, she started her own organization, 1927, called the African Universal Church and the Commercial League. She did not live long enough after that to write the Constitution and bylaws or have it incorporated, because during this time when the tension existed between her and Garvey, she was under threat of her life. She was arrested multiple times, and I've been able to document that in Georgia and Florida. She was stripped down and they examined her body, her naked body in the public, the authorities did, to see if she had the markings of the African tribe on her body. She was humiliated. Yet she continued to draw thousands and thousands of people. She started her own organization because she knew that she could not continue with Garvey, and his organization was falling apart. Unfortunately, on March the 8th, 1928, shortly after Garvey was deported, she left Jacksonville, Florida, which is where the headquarters of her organization was, and she had chapters throughout the South and to the North. She left Jacksonville to go to Miami to speak at a convention hall that was both a church and part of the UNIA meeting. She had been warned not to come because she was under threat of her life, and she had bodyguards. On that day, that evening, she took the pulpit, and the witness or the statement from my dad, who knew her personally and was a part of the movement, both Garvey and hers, she mounted the pulpit and opened her Bible. And she began to read from John 14. That's the scripture that Bettina read this morning. She read it from, I think, the Voice edition, but from the King James Version, it would have read like this: "Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. For in my Father's house, there are many mansions. And if it was not so, I would have told you." As she read that scripture, quoted that scripture, a lone gunman from the side of the building put a bullet in her head, and she fell in the pulpit. As I think about it, it still gives me chills. The crowd was so intense that the gunman who shot at her from the doorway was mobbed by the crowd, and he was actually killed on sight. However, there were two other people that were arrested for her death, but no one was ever convicted. All three were lieutenants in Marcus Garvey's organization. The question that history still continues to haunt those of us that embrace both Garvey and Prince ADORKA Lord KOFI: did he give the hit, or did someone else in his organization do it? When Princess KOFI died March the 8th, 1928, in Miami, Florida, her body was not buried for 6 months till August 17th of that same year. They took her back to Jacksonville, Florida, where she is enshrined in a mausoleum. And I visited my husband and I a few years ago. But when she died, just like with other organizations, her organization began to splinter, and there was continued infighting. My dad, who I said was a member of both, was able to incorporate African Universal Church and Commercial Corporation and write the Constitution. And he became the leader that succeeded her in that church. So I grew up all of my life hearing about this woman. Her picture hung on the wall in our church. It hung on the wall in our home. We celebrated her life every year. I didn't know that the world knew about her. I didn't even know about the significance until in 1995, I stumbled upon this file from Richard Newman, who is a historian and a scholar on religious history. He had actually reached out to my dad just prior to my dad's death in 1978. He wanted to interview my dad. At the time, my dad was sick. He died shortly thereafter. So he never contacted with her. And I was able to find in the file even the notes where he had tried to contact my dad. Princess KOFI's legacy is that she was a woman born out of time. She understood the intersection between spirituality and practicality. Her message wasn't about a God in the sky, here and after, by and by, but it's about how can we live here on this earth as daughters and sons of Africa. How can we reconnect and develop trade and commerce? She wasn't so much about trying to fit into the US system of politics or its economy, but how can we establish an economy with our brothers and sisters here that connects us to the richness of Africa? There's much more I could share about her life, her legacy, in fact, her spirit, and how she carried herself was the reason when I was elevated to the leadership of this church that I chose the title of Lady Mother, resident bishop, resident apostle, resident some of the overseers, because her humbleness, she saw herself as a mother to her children, that she was calling back to Africa, back to their purpose, back to their God-given sense of who they were, the richness of them, awakening them to who they should be. She awakened in many this idea, and it never went back to sleep. And I'm so thankful for that, because she awakened it in my dad, who was never able to let it go. And I, 100 years later, am still a recipient of her life. I'll share more at some other time, probably in a different seminar, but Princess ADORKA Laura KOFI, she thought of herself and called herself the warrior. Let me get it right. The warrior mother of Africa, of Africa's warriors of the Most High. Her warfare was joyful. Her warfare was loving. Her warfare was kind. Her warfare was as a nurturing mother calling her children back home. Ashe and amen.